couple months ago, I used to fly the Hyperion as my primary PvP battleship, and at the time the Hyperion was, and I believe it still is, one of the most insane ship projects that I've ever made in EVE. I used to have 5,453 armor repair per armor repairer, and I had 4 of them, so in the end I was able to repair about 70 to 80% armor every 6.4 seconds, and that is pretty insane. It had a really broken tank. Now it will be interesting to see how the tank is holding up with the new implants, and looks like I also forgot to add Omega. Let me quickly fix that. Okay, now let's take a look at the ship description. Advanced large raygun operation bonus will give you plus 9% large raygun damage, plus 75% large raygun accuracy fall-off, and advanced Battleship bonus will give you plus 75% armor repair. Now the Abaddon gets a armor resistance bonus, while the Hyperion gets a armor repair bonus. Both very useful and both very interesting. Now the Hyperion has 2 drones, 8 high slots, 4 medium slots, 6 low slots, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs, 101,000 defense. The Hyperion is a armor tank, of course. Don't shield tank the Hyperion. It's not going to be a very good shield tank. Now the capacitor will be a little bit lower than the capacitor on the Abaddon. 16,000 on the Abaddon, 11,000 on the Hyperion. The recharge rate looks good. Maximum capacitor recharge rate per second also looks pretty solid. And all the other stats on this ship are generally okay. The Hyperion is pretty fast, and I really like the speed on the Hyperion. Now let me quickly turn on the modules, because, well, when you run out of Omega, everything gets turned off, obviously, so let me quickly fix that. Okay, 2 more turrets are offline, now they are online. So, this is the current setup that I have on this ship. This is the old school setup that I used on the Hyperion. Here you can take a look at the stats of the railguns. Now the blasters have short range, and they are usually used in very close range combat, but it has a very decent fall-off, 18 kilometers, that I really do like. In the low slots I have quad A-type armor repairs. I did replicate the exact same build that I used on my old Hyperion, just to see how this ship holds up. Now let me quickly turn on the rigs back. Okay, now on the Hyperion I used 4P combat integration modules, and they're focused on maximum possible armor repair as well as maximum possible resistance, and this combination seems to be one of the best possible combinations on this ship. Might appear a little bit expensive, but in the end I made this ship so tanky. I was able to tank glass, DPS, striker battleships, a bunch of them, and they were not able to break my tank. It was hilarious. Now as for the engineering rigs, well, maximum capacitor performance, of course. This is the exact same setup that I used on my old Hyperion. Now, the armor stats might appear a little bit lower, and that's because the ship doesn't have any armor resistance bonus like the Abaddon, but it does have a very beefy armor repair bonus that will cover the lack of armor resistance. Now with the implants we have received the thermal circulation implant, and you can use this implant to increase the armor resistance on your ship by 20%. So you could technically get Abaddon armor resistance stats on the Hyperion if you use this implant. The good thing is that you don't have to have a maximum level implant to get the 15 level stat, which makes this a very affordable and easy to obtain implant. As for the general units, well, basically I would go for Nosferatu performance, armor repair performance, capacitor battery performance, afterburner performance, all these things that will make the ship last as long as possible. And you can see that the implant kicked in, it gave me extra armor stats. Okay, let's undock and let me show you the active stats on
Undocking.
this ship. Should be pretty interesting. Now with the latest balance patch, the armor repairs did get a slight nerf on armor repair, but the cycle time got improved. So that means less repair but faster repairs, which means I will recover armor a little bit faster. 325,000 hit points, 81, 81, 85 and 82% resistance, which is, you know, really solid. Looks really good with quad repairs. 4,853 armor every 7 seconds. Okay, looks like over here I don't have the maxed out core. On my old core, on the live server, I have the nano core maxed out, and it does repair at 6.4 seconds, maybe even below that. I will have to double check it. Okay, now with the thermal implant, you get the extra resistance when the heat is below 30. As you can see now, the stats are a little bit lower because I did engage the implant. You can use the implant if you want to get extra DPS, but I would recommend that you only use this implant for the extra armor resistance. However, you get a pretty decent damage boost, 3,400 DPS on a tank Hyperion, which is really solid. However, you do lose armor resistance, and I would also recommend that you don't overheat the implant, because your rate of fire will drastically be reduced if heat reaches 100, and that will literally cripple the DPS of your ship until the implant is cooled off. But the armor resistance is basically the best thing about the thermal implant. If you are a armor tank, then this implant is the way to go. Extra resistance, always very nice. Now the next build has dual adaptives, dual batteries and dual armor repairs. This is a more capacitor stable build, and I personally really like it. A lot more stable than the previous one, but you will have less armor repair. However, even with dual armor repairs, you should be pretty tanky. You can also remove one capacitor battery and use one afterburner to quickly get within range. However, the capacitor will be a little bit lower. Now, I did mention that the Hyperion is one of the fastest battleships in the game. I was really surprised when I initially saw the speed on the ship. It goes easily above 1.1 kilometers per second. It's up there with the Macariel in speed. It's a little bit slower than the Typhoon, but it's, you know, still a lot faster than most of the battleships. So let's take a look at the active stats. 618.88 meters per second. That is pretty quick for a battleship. Really solid. 7.28 seconds capacitor. The tank is about the same. I used the thermal implant. And the DPS on the ship is also the same. About 2000 DPS is more than enough on most battleships nowadays. Now we can also use a damage control instead of the capacitor battery. but that will definitely make an impact on the capacitor. However, it will improve the tank. You can also use triple armor repairs with the damage control. The damage control is used as a panic button. Will give you about 13 seconds of immortality. However, the capacitor will be a little bit lower, a little bit less stable because of the extra armor repair. You can also use a reactive armor hardener instead of the damage control if you are fighting with Armada ships or drone boats. The capacitor will be about the same, and of course you can use triple adaptives and triple armor repairs. This is a build that I see quite often and it does run really well. Excellent armor repair, excellent. Alright, now it will be time to put the tank to the test. So this is the build that I used on the Hyperion for PvP. I always liked the 4 armor repair setup on the ship. Now, is that overkill? I would say yes, but at the time I actually needed 4 armor repairs to be able to tank the massive fleets that did engage us. Nowadays I feel like quad armor repairs is overkill. However, who knows, perhaps if we get jumped by a big fleet, then this build might end up being used again. I don't know, it depends. Now, the main difference between back then and between this build in the current test is the capacitor. Back then the capacitor used to be about 8 to 6 minutes. It really did depend on the situation, but with the implants, with the general units, and with the November balance patch, the capacitor usage has been increased on the large armor repairs, and having 4 of them is going to be very capacitor heavy. However, with smart capacitor management, you can easily make the capacitor last for a very long time. It's funny that the number given in the fitting window is usually not the exact number that you will see in real use. Usually it lasts a lot longer, especially with smart capacitor management. The DPS and the range on the blasters are really nice. I like that the ship has a fall-off bonus. It does hit up to 25 and sometimes up to 30 kilometers, which is really impressive for the blasters. They usually have really short range. Now the optimal range is about 9 kilometers. I keep the target at 12 just in case I encounter a frigate or the star that I might not be able to track. Now, this is why I like to use cruisers for storyline missions. Battleships might have a problem to track smaller ships if they're full tank build, while cruisers don't suffer from that issue. They can track the small targets just fine. However, with the battleships you might have to sacrifice a bit of tank in order to be able to track smaller targets. And small targets inside of storyline missions are very dangerous. They often have webs and scramblers. Using webs and scramblers on your ship is also a very good idea, but sometimes even that is not going to be enough to be able to hit the fast moving frigate. So TRI computers are going to be most likely going to be a thing that you will have to use on the Hyperion. Now I personally don't like doing that. The Hyperion in my hands is usually a PvP ship. In PvP you don't really need to use TRI computers on the ship. Small targets can't really do much on the armor on this ship, and big targets, well, you can easily hit big targets and you can easily tank them. After all, the Hyperion is all about the tank. Now with the thermal implant and with the high power coil you can increase the DPS, you can increase the DPS quite a bit. And I guess you can use the high power coil implant for DPS, but you can also use the thermal implant for the same purpose. Although, like I mentioned before, the thermal implant is better for tanking. The thermal implant is best in tank PvP builds. It can also be used for tank PvE builds, but for PvE you don't really need to have a lot of tank unless you are doing a storyline mission. In low-sec, low-sec can be treated as null-sec in terms of how you build your ship. For null-sec it's important to have a very good tank. You can also say the same thing about low-sec, where PvP is quite common. So for low-sec I would still be using a tank build. Now the only difference is going to be with the tracking. The tracking might be the only issue that you might encounter with Battleship that has a full tank build. But again, like I did show a couple days ago, you can use a cruiser, destroyer, frigate, battlecruiser for storyline missions. It's a lot safer. It might not be fast, but at the same time, is it really going to be fast with this ship if I have issues tracking smaller targets? I believe while recording this I did encounter a couple of problematic ships that I couldn't hit, and here I have maxed out skills for the railguns. So even with maxed out skills I think I had some issues with a couple of small ships. Now using stabs might be, you know, a good idea. However, if you use stabs you will not have the capacitor bonus from the capacitor rigs, and that will have an impact on the overall tank of the ship. You might not be able to tank for a very long time if you swap the capacitor rigs for warp core optimizers. And the Hyperion as a sniper, I didn't really like that setup. I did try out and it just felt a little bit weird. It's doable, you can do it, but it just felt like I wasn't really using the ship as it's meant to be used. The Hyperion is meant to be a close range brawling ship, close range active armor tank. However, I also did use rails for PvP on the Hyperion, and surprisingly I had fun with rails. It's very good for a camp. It's also very good if you are caught in a uncomfortable PvP position where the targets are orbiting at about 30 to 40 kilometers. You can hit with rails at that distance without a problem. Also helps if you have tracking disruptors on your ship with blasters, and if someone has tracking disruptors on your Hyperion, you will not hit much because you already have very short range. But with railguns you can hit targets even if you have a track computer working on your ship. Now I'm letting my armor get low. I really want to see how quickly this thing can recover armor. Now one thing that got changed in the November balance patch, the armor repairs, the large armor repairs, did become faster in the cycle time, which means that from 7 seconds with my current nanocore on the live server Hyperion, I have about 5 seconds per armor repair. Now here, because the nanocore is not fully leveled up and I only have the primary stat, the time got reduced from 9 seconds to 7 seconds, which is, you know, a very decent little change. And if you add the nanocore, if you add the rigs, and if you add the general unit, you get a very tanky Hyperion, and you get some really nice and really fat armor repairs. It's really satisfying to just watch your armor go from 20% to 100% in a couple moments. Reminds me on the Marauders from EVE Online. They did have a massive bonus on shield boosters and armor repairs. You could tank whole fleets with them, and my idea with the Hyperion was something about the same as that, something around the same as that, and I think I did manage to accomplish my goal. We'll have to try out to do the same thing with the Maelstrom and with the Tempest Striker. Those ships are also really tanky. The Maelstrom has amazing active shield stats, amazing active shield tank stats that I will show you. Can also be vastly improved with the general units, and can be vastly improved with the implants. So technically I should be able to replicate some of the EVE Online builds into this game, and I'm honestly very happy that I can do that very easily. After all of my builds are based on EVE Online builds, and so far I can tell you that's been working really well, and I don't plan to change the builds just yet. Now the next wave has spawned here, and so far, you know, the capacitor looks pretty good, although you can see that the capacitor does go down when the armor repairs are active. However, the armor is pretty good, pretty stable, and there's just no way that these ships can break the tank. Now here I will have the tracking issue that I was talking about. That Heron Explorer is not going to be that easy to hit with the blasters. The drones are doing good damage, but the blasters are... Okay, finally it did hit eventually. But you could see that I had some tracking issues against those ships. Let's see if I can hit the interceptor. Well, looks like it missed. And this is the thing that I don't like about battleships. They will have a very hard time against those small ships inside of the missions, which makes them very vulnerable. I have no stabs, but I have been scrambled. Actually I have 2 points on my ship, so I can't warp out. And currently this ship is very vulnerable to pirates. However, if this was a fast cruiser, a frigate or destroyer, I would be pretty safe, because that frigate would already be dead and I would remove the points from my ship. Raw DPS is not everything inside of the storyline missions. You have to play tactical and you have to play smart. You can see what happens to battleships in my Cariel Mach Attack series that I do. We blow up a lot of battleships that run storylines and that run encounters, mostly because they are slow, their ship is slow, and also they don't orbit, they usually just sit at 0 or sit at 100. Snipers are very easy to catch with the Stratius and very easy to tackle. So battleships are very vulnerable and very risky to fly inside of low sec. They are very big and very easy targets. However, cruisers, well, cruisers are not that easy to catch. Actually, for a matter of fact, the most failed tackle targets that I had are cruisers, Phantasms, Vigilants, Cinnaballs, even battlecruisers. I do fail to tackle those ships the most. And you might wonder why? Well, it's difficult to catch a fast moving ship. So where risk is pretty high, I wouldn't be using a battleship. I would be using something that can easily escape or something that can easily fight off tackle, which again would mean that cruisers and smaller ships are the best for that purpose. And also one fun fact, if you are in a battleship, you will most likely be jumped by another battleship or another battleship fleet. And that is very difficult to escape, because, well, your ship is slow, the other battleships that warp in will have excellent warp in, so when they will land at their optimal range. Now, if you're in a cruiser, then most likely you will be jumped by another cruiser, a destroyer, or a frigate. And these ships are very easy to counter, very easy to fight off, and it's very easy to win against those smaller ships. And if someone does drop a battleship on your cruiser, well, then you can easily warp away before they even land. So, all these little things are very important, and you have to account for them when you run missions in low sec. In no sec, you can use a battleship if you have your own space, your own pocket, where you have scouts looking at the pipe entrance. They can easily alert the whole corp, alliance, and coalition in case there is a incoming attack. But in OSEC you really can't do that unless you have alts on every gate, and sometimes that might be a little bit difficult because some systems have 6 or 7 gates, and in order to cover everything you will have to have a lot of alts. And using a pod scout for scan alert can work, but we have specialized scanning pilots that can scan without alerting anything. So yeah, even a pod anti-scan is not going to work that well. It could work in most cases, but eventually you will stumble upon someone who has the skills and someone who has the ship. So you might get caught if that happens. Which again, if you are in a cruiser or a smaller, faster ship, you don't have to worry about that much, because you can easily escape. And you can easily fight off the pirate. Well then, I'm really happy with the current Hyperion. For armor repairs are very silly, but as you can see, they seem to be working really well. Against battlecruisers, battleships, the tracking should be enough. Smaller ships are not going to be able to break the tank of the Hyperion. I can tank a lot, and I can tank for a very long time with this ship. So I would say the Hyperion got improved, the Abaddon got improved. Both ships are actually very fun, and both ships are really solid. So in the end, I would say give a chance to both of the ships. But first, of course, go get the ship that you have skills for. Both the armor tank chunks are amazing, beautiful ships that will definitely never disappoint. And I will actually fly both of them. I already bought the Abaddon, I already bought a Hyperion, and I will fly them into PvP again because they are very fun ships. Alright, well, with that being said, hope that this video was helpful, hope that you enjoyed this little Hyperion run, and man, the armor repairs on this are still very nice, and they are ridiculous. I love it. So, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.